Time to bring on our good friend, Hank South of BamaOnline.com, part of the 247sports.com network. We do that by going to the Peterbrook Chocolatier studio line at 205-342-9904. Hank, first and foremost, a good Thursday morning to you.
Good Thursday to you. How you doing?
We are doing great. We're anticipating another big crowd on Saturday at Bryant-Denny Stadium for the 2019 A-Day game. And really, Hank, and I know this probably precedes your time there at BamaOnline.com, but we were just talking about the importance of that very first A-Day game of the Nick Saban era. Saban really talked about the significance of having a big turnout back in those days and how much it could impact recruiting. And I think it's safe to say in retrospect, really a foundation block for what this program has accomplished under Nick Saban. And I know you talk to these kids on an annual basis about the big crowds that we see here for a spring game. Is that a pretty common refrain that you hear from these guys that you talk to each and every year when it comes to the turnout for an 8-day game?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Recruits like to have a good time when they come on these visits, and certainly, good turnout can differentiate one program from another. These kids take so many visits throughout the spring and summer now. It seems like every weekend these top recruits are on a different campus. So, to have a turnout, a big turnout for a game like A-Day, for a spring game, to, stand out from other visits these kids have been on, and even, some games in the fall that visits they've been on, it can certainly impact recruiting, and it kind of leaves that lasting impression that we see kind of go on into closer towards signing day and that kind of stuff. I know last year, he didn't end up at Alabama, but Dax Hill, 5-star safety, he took his first visit to Tuscaloosa for A-Day, and that kind of stayed with him through his official visit in June. And Bama was the team to beat at one point, and then obviously got his commitment late, but that's just one example of these top level recruits that that kind of atmosphere can have a solid impact on.
I know you wrote about this, you outlined this, and you can find it right now at BamaOnline.com. But kind of give us an idea of the source for commitments that A-Day can be in terms of your past experience of guys going ahead and making that plunge and joining a signing class during that time that they're on campus for a spring game.
Yeah, I started thinking about it earlier this week of just, this, I believe this is my fifth A-Day to cover since I started in 2015. And I was thinking about all the guys that have committed this weekend in the time that I've covered it, and I thought it'd be an interesting story. The only A-Day that didn't get a commitment that weekend was 2017. And so I went back and looked, and, the biggest A-Day commitment in my time covering Alabama was obviously Najee Harris back in 2015. And we saw what that recruitment turned into towards the end. And I outlined that in the story, kind of how that all culminated into literal flight tracking of when Najee Harris actually got to Alabama. And, some people thought he was going back to California. Some, obviously, Michigan was there. And then So that was fun, but that was certainly, in my time covering Alabama, the most significant commitment of this weekend. And, an interesting one, Trey Sanders actually committed to Alabama 3 years ago, early on as a 2019 recruit. We saw him obviously decommit a couple of years later and then rejoin the class this past December. But it's an interesting look back, that there's been some big ones, Talia Tagovailoa last year, and a few others. So, I encourage everyone to go look at that because it is an interesting look and kind of, hints, not hints, but, shows what can happen on 8-day weekends with the visitors' turnouts and the potential for commitments.
Knowing that Alabama is going to have literally hundreds of kids on campus tomorrow for the spring game, give us just a few of the very top prospects that the Crimson Tide will entertain here, maybe beginning today, maybe starting tomorrow, or just on Saturday, that sort of elite group that Alabama, with already 14 hard commitments for the 2020 class, are looking to close out between now and December, or maybe even the late period in February.
Yeah, everyone wants to know who the five-star recruits that are coming are, and there's currently three of them confirmed, one of which will be an official visit, and that's Julian Fleming, the five-star receiver from Pennsylvania. He's ranked the number one receiver in the country. And this is a big visit. He's a guy that, Bama's been on for a while. They made his top six, I believe, when he put it out back in January. And he's visited before. He was on campus last spring as well, so this will be a second visit down to Tuscaloosa. But I believe it's his first official visit, so it's kind of setting the bar of the future visits he'll take. And another interesting note with Julian Fleming is he's actually a former teammate of Stone Hollenbeck, who's actually going to walk on at Alabama when he's going to get on campus this summer. But he's part of the 2019 class, and he'll be down in Tuscaloosa this weekend as well. So he'll have a familiar face down there, and it's a good chance for him to get to know Holman Wiggins, the new wide receivers coach, and kind of refamiliarize himself with the Alabama staff after, of course, Josh Gaddis left. Another big five-star recruit, and I wrote about him earlier this week when he put out his top schools list, is Reggie Grimes, who's now been the legacy, son of former Alabama defensive lineman Reggie Grimes. He put out his top six on Monday, and he'll be on campus this weekend, and I believe this is his first trip down in 2019. He's of course been a few times prior for camp last summer and then a game this past fall. But it's a big visit for him as well. He's in no rush to make a decision, but kind of same thing with Julian Fleming. Get a chance to meet the new staff in person and get to know them. His new recruiter is offensive line coach Kyle Flood. So, they'll be spending time together, and then obviously he'll want to get to know Sal Sinceri and Pete Golding a little bit better as well. And then the last five-star visitor that's currently confirmed is, of course, an Alabama commitment, Chris Braswell, who's the nation's top weak side defensive end out of Alabama's favorite St. Francis Academy up in Baltimore. So those are the three guys right now. And I made a note in the story. Like you said, there's going to be so many guys on campus this weekend. But it's also worth noting that there's the ACT happening on Saturday, and there's a lot of proms going on Saturday. So it's not going to be, I don't think, the biggest 8A visitors list we've seen in terms of elite talent being able to make it out, but there are going to be some notable guys, and it's worth noting Bryce Young, the five-star quarterback that's committed to USC, he was actually planning on coming. He had a little bit of a family emergency he had to tend to out in California, so he's not able to travel this weekend. And I was also told five-star athlete Eric Gilbert wanted to come this weekend, but he has prom. So that might be affecting some visitor turnouts, not just at Alabama, but other spring games in Auburn and Florida as well. So it'll be something we're watching, but it'll still be a big weekend for sure.
Yeah, prom season's kind of very much in season. I can tell you that personally. We've got a daughter who's going 3 for 3 in the last 3 weeks when it comes to prom. She's a composite 24/7 sports 5-star when it comes to proms in 2020. Hank, what about from a basketball standpoint? What Nate Oates is trying to put together, what he's trying to finish here. Obviously, Trendon Watford out there still, the 5-star forward from over in Mountain Brook, but perhaps a grad transfer visitor, I'm told, coming in this weekend. Have you heard much about that? Maybe a point guard or a guard type from West Virginia.
Yeah, James Bolden, an interesting name. He actually, Evan Daniels, our great basketball insider for 24/7 Sports, actually wrote about this the day Nate Oates was announced as the new head coach of Alabama. He was a guy that they were going to look at bringing in a grad transfer out of West Virginia, and he confirmed. Bolden confirmed to Bama Online earlier this week that he will indeed be on campus this weekend for an official visit, and so it's pretty interesting. Kind of a pretty interesting time as far as finishing out the 2019 class. Like you said, Trendon Watford is still the big fish out there. We're all waiting to see where he decides to commit to and sign with on April 20th. And Nate Oates was actually said the other day on the radio that they're holding that spot. He didn't say his name, obviously, because you can't do that, but they're keeping that one scholarship open for Trendon Watford. And then obviously yesterday we saw the news with Deontay Wood entering the transfer portal as well. So that kind of leaves 2 open spots at this point in the process. So a guy like James Bolden, seems to have a lot of interest from the Alabama staff. And so, we'll see what happens with that this weekend. And then another interesting name I mentioned on Bama Online the other day, James Rojas. He's a forward that was signed to play at Buffalo out of Hutchinson Community College. He's a New York native. But obviously with Nate Oates now coming to Alabama, he's working on, he told me he's working on getting his release from his letter of intent to Buffalo, and he wants to go to Alabama. So we'll see kind of how all this, the numbers game works out and whether there's space and all that. But a lot of interesting developments kind of in play right now for Alabama basketball and finishing this 2019 class.
Now back to football. We're talking with Hank South, recruiting analyst for BamaOnline.com on Southern Fried Sports, presented by Mercedes-Benz of Tuscaloosa. Now, from a football recruiting standpoint, Hank, we're talking about going straight from spring football into the evaluation period. Is that correct? Coming up next week?
That's right. It's actually, it's interesting because 8A is a little bit earlier this year, so it kind of gives, I think last year it was a week into the evaluation period before Bama got out onto the road. It was wrapping up 8A in spring practices. So with 8A wrapping up on Saturday, this is going to give the new Alabama staff the entire evaluation period that starts on Monday, April 15th, and goes all the way to the end of May to get out on the road, get their faces in the schools. We're going to see a ton of offers go out, both in the 2020 class and the 20 and beyond. And so it's going to be a lot of new names kind of popping up, and we're going to see guys scheduling more visits and kind of making those plans. So it goes straight from spring practice and those kind of visits all the way to then coaches going out on the road and then right into camp season. So it's always moving.
So Hank, what are some of the schools or places on April 15th, next Monday, that you anticipate this staff hitting first out there on the recruiting trail?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think obviously they're going to go after their big targets quick, and I believe they have 2 visits they can make for each prospect, or they have 160 visits I think total as a staff, and I might be wrong on that number, but each recruit can get 2 visits. So I think you got to look at Bryce Young. I mean, one of them. They need a quarterback in this class. I think he'll probably be one of the first stops Steve Sarkisian makes and gets out there in season. It's going to be interesting watching kind of the quarterback recruiting develop, kind of go along this spring, because obviously, Steve Sarkisian is going to have a big say in this, and he's going to want to see these guys throw in person too. So I think you'll see Bryce Young be one of the first stops. Beyond that, receivers a big need. I wouldn't be surprised to see Julian Fleming get a visit coming off his official visit. They tend to kind of time it up with those kind of guys. And then, inside linebacker is a big need. Justin Flo out in California is a big target as well. Really, these guys that were high on Alabama, then the staff turnover kind of affected a little bit. Guys like Justin Flo, guys like 5-star linebacker Savell Smalls. I think those are the ones you kind of have to hit first, just so they can, see the Bama still in it for them and still wants them and kind of, refamiliarize themselves with the new staff and kind of get that interest sparked again.
With all the new faces on this coaching staff, Hank, have you gotten a good feel yet from a geographical standpoint where all these guys are going to be responsible from an area standpoint?
Yeah, that's still kind of we're still kind of discovering that. I think some of the hotbed areas, obviously, we've seen Charles Kelly kind of take a bigger role in Atlanta and Southeast Alabama, kind of in that down in that Phoenix City, Auburn area, up to Atlanta. Charles Huff, we've seen take over South Florida, which Bama, that's been a very good area for Alabama in recent cycles, and they've never really missed a step since losing Mario Cristobal. They went straight from Cristobal to Joe Panunzio, and now it looks like Charles Huff is going to pick up where they left off there. Huff is also big in the DMV area, so he's kind of picked up any slack, that slack from Mike Loxley leaving to go to Maryland. So that's an area we're watching. Obviously, Steve Sarkisian's ties to the West Coast, I think, are going to keep Bama strong there. We all know Tosh Lupoy's kind of strength recruiting the West Coast, and I don't think we're going to see a huge drop-off with Steve Sarkisian taking over that area. And then Jeff Banks is obviously in California as well and is a strong recruiter. So those are kind of the main ones. Pete Golding has been strong in Louisiana. We'll see if he continues to take that area with his new responsibilities as defensive coordinator. But, we're seeing them kind of all over the place, and each coach has their own expertise in these areas that they brought from the previous stops.
There you go. Hank South, as always, doing a great job delivering the goods here on Southern Fried Sports. If you enjoyed that, you really need to get to BamaOnline.com right now and check out all the great work that Hank South, Tim Watts, and the rest of the recruiting staff there at BOL puts out on a daily basis. Hank, good luck to you, my man. I know it's going to be a crazy weekend, but there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we'll be interested to see all your work coming up in the next few days. Thanks, Hank.
Yes, sir. Thanks for having me.